What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And seeing as Hawkeye's releasing in about a week, I figured I might as well make some kind of Marvel video in preparation for that. And I thought I might talk about, one of the movies that Hawkeye's in, but then I realized that I don't actually like any of the movies from the MCU that Hawkeye is in. So I've just thought, I'll make a video on my favorite MCU movie. Now, I have made a video on my favorite MCU thing, which is The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but that is not a film. Despite it following, a 3-act structure, a similar structure to a film, it is still a TV show. So, having clicked on this video, you will see that my favorite MCU film is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, despite that, it's not one of my favorite movies. I wouldn't say any Marvel movie is one of my favorite movies. This film still has many of the issues that plague every single film in this franchise, with the sexualization of a lot of people. It's something that still bugs me. You may be sick of me bringing it up, but I feel like I have an obligation to do so because it does bug me, and I feel like they need to kind of stop with that because it just feels counterproductive in a series like this where they try to portray a lot of strong female characters, in this film especially, and then you just kind of sexualize them a lot. And it just feels counterproductive. Like, this is like anti-representation. Like, what do you want people to take away from this, It's still an issue. It still bothers me in this film. There is some bad CGI. And something I will say about it is that, all my favorite movies, like, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, all these stories, they always have some kind of goal that the characters in the story are trying to achieve. There's something that the characters are trying to make their way towards achieving, and as the story unfolds, as the journey unfolds to achieving that goal, growth occurs along the way for the characters within the story. And in this film, there isn't really a goal that the characters are trying to achieve until the third act, which can make the third act feel kind of rushed, like the film kind of rushes into the third act because they need some kind of objective for the characters to, make their way towards. And that's kind of where the film does kind of slow down a little bit for me, is kind of the third act. I don't love that part of the film, but I still like it. It's not even it's not nearly as bad as I'd say more than half of MCU movies, But with that said, that's about all I have to say negatively about this film. I think it's just really well done. And I don't think I've ever seen, a movie like this, a blockbuster movie like today, especially an MCU one, that is able to strike such a perfectly balanced tone. Like, it is very cheesy and has a lot of cheesy moments, but they still somehow feel sincere. Like, towards the end of the film, there's the scene in the final battle with Star-Lord and his dad, and you've got Yondu, Michael Rooker, and he goes, "I didn't control the arrow with my fin, son. I controlled it with my heart." And it's like this kind of cheesy moment, but at the same time, it kind of makes you feel something. It's a weirdly heartwarming film, and it's one of I would say 2 Marvel movies. The only other one I can think of off the top of my head is Spider-Man Homecoming, that has actual humor that is funny and works well, and also doesn't interfere with the tone. This is where I'm going to actually say something positive about James Gunn, who is a person that I don't really like. From what I know about him, I don't like him as a person, but I am separating art from the artist right now. His just style and personality is just fully on display in this film, and I feel like he just really excels at balancing humor and emotion just really well. I can't think of any other, filmmaker that I've seen do that. Now, you may say he also did that with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. I guess this is a controversial opinion, but that's nothing new for my channel, I don't really like the first Guardians of the Galaxy. It feels considerably less stylistic. It feels like James Gunn was maybe kind of reined in a little bit more restricted in that one. And it just feels like a cliche Marvel movie. When I think about that one, I think of it as a Marvel movie. When I think about this one, I don't really think about it as a Marvel movie. I just think about it as a movie, and it's just its own kind of story, and it's a story about people who are flawed. It's a story about imperfect individuals and how our imperfections make us human. And that's crazy to think about, that this is this weird galactic, galaxy hopping movie with talking CGI raccoons, and despite that, the CGI raccoon is one of the most human characters in this entire franchise. Because this film just tells such a poignant story about family and finding family where you least expect it. And it's a story about people. It's a story about human beings and the imperfections of people, and I really appreciate that. And it makes these characters actually feel, like they are good people, like they are real people, which is crazy, as I just said, because a lot of them are weird alien people, and they feel more human than a lot of Marvel characters, because as I've stated before, a lot of Marvel characters in modern movies just start to feel like joke robot machines. Like, they're like, ah ha ha, joke. Like, they don't feel like people. Like the line delivery and the scripts in these Marvel movies, they start to feel, I guess, inhuman. Like, they don't feel like people. But in this film, all the characters feel like people. Every joke is intentional. The reason it doesn't interfere with the tone is because every character has a reason for why they act the way they do. They all have something under the surface. They act like irrationally and say, like, I don't know, mean or stupid or offensive jokes because they feel like they have to hide how they feel. There's this brilliant scene between Michael Rooker, or Yondu, and Rocket, where he confronts Rocket about why he's such an asshole, and he says, I know that you act like you're the toughest and the best, but actually you're the most scared of all. I know who you are because you're me. And, like, I can't think of any other scene in, like, any Marvel movie that's as poignant as that. Like, it's just this scene of two individuals just kind of just arguing with each other because they've just hurt so much in their lives, and they just try to cover that up by just pushing people away. And it's such a real moment. Like, these characters feel so real. The CGI raccoon feels more real than, like, actual human people in other Marvel movies. Like, I don't know how they pull that off, but they do. And it's like this stupid movie about CG raccoons and crap actually made me tear up at the end with the blue guy sacrificing himself to save his surrogate son, who's like a half-god person. Like, this movie has no right to work as well as it does. But everything is so well balanced. As I said, I can't think of any other, modern blockbuster, especially a Marvel one, that is able to balance its tone so perfectly without undermining emotional scenes. It knows which scenes to take seriously and which ones to not take seriously, and it kind of knows which elements are more kind of corny. Like, a lot of people complain about Karen Gillan as Nebula, and I believe that I agree, and I believe that is one of the weaker elements of the film from, an emotional standpoint. So when they give her this dramatic monologue, they kind of add this little comedic moment at the end, but it doesn't feel like it undercuts it to me because, like, they know that element is, like, really corny. Like, that character, like, intentionally, the way she acts and everything is just really corny. So they're like, all right, we'll generate humor from that. Like, I don't know how they do it, but, like, at every turn, the film never feels inconsistent. It's just a watchable movie. Like, I just enjoy watching this. I had a smile on my face. The soundtrack's great, and surprisingly, a lot of the CGI actually holds up well. As I stated, there is some pretty bad CGI, I'd say, especially towards the finale and the climax. But even then, the climax still, in my opinion, is pretty solid and far better than a lot of other Marvel movies. It's creative. The way the characters fight and everything, it's creative. It's fun to watch. And it constantly has that, emotional center to it. And even, the character Ego, the Kurt Russell villain, like, he actually is understandable. And even when he's about to die and they're about to blow up his brain, you kind of feel a little bit bad for him. Now, just to clarify what I mean here, I don't mean that I actually feel bad for the genocidal maniac who murdered his own children. I simply mean that you can understand where his character is coming from because he's a character that throughout his entire life has been striving to achieve perfection, and the main point of the film and the main theme of the film is imperfection and how that makes us human. So you kind of see and understand how this character just went down the wrong path and misunderstood how imperfection is what makes us special. And he says, you know, you'll be just like everyone else. You won't be perfect. You know, it's kind of the villain is the perfect opposition to these other characters because they're all these flawed, imperfect people. And he's like, you're going to be just like them. And, you know, Chris Pratt just says, and what's wrong with that? Like, that is just, that perfectly encapsulates, you know, the entire, you know, concept, the themes of this film. And then you have the funeral for Yondu at the end. And basically, with his final speech to Yondu, Chris Pratt says he wasn't a perfect person. He wasn't an angel. He wasn't perfect. But basically, you know, who is? And it's like celebrating the life of this person who wasn't perfect, but who tried. You know? Definitely tried harder than freaking evil Kurt Russell, right? But it's like, it feels so real. And I can't think of any other Marvel movie that ends on like such a bittersweet note that this film ends on, where you just have all these people that doubted Yondu and didn't, like, kind of hated him, show up to celebrate his life, you know, and say goodbye and kind of show their respects to him. And the final shot of this film is just a shot of Rocket with a tear going down his face. The final shot of this movie is of a raccoon, a CGI raccoon crying. And it's somehow the most poignant ending to a Marvel movie. And to one of these modern blockbusters. Like, how? Like, I'm just thinking about this right now, and like how astonishing it is that this film works so well. It's just such a well done movie. Like, and I'm saying this, and I know that a lot of people say this about the first film, but I honestly can't remember the first film. Like, I don't even know what happened in it. But like everything in this film just works for me. Like, the themes that it deals with, you know, the story, like all these moments between these characters, like, it's just a story told about imperfect people, not about perfect angelic figures. That's what I'm sick of now with modern Marvel movies, is the constant, you know, need to glorify these characters who weren't actually very good people and act like they were these angelic, great, heroic people. Like in Avengers Endgame with the death of Tony Stark, everyone acting like it's this big, you know, emotional thing. But it's like, Tony Stark was a dick. I hate to say that, but he was a jerk. And he wasn't very nice to anybody, so they have him do one nice thing, and then they act like it's the best thing ever done. But in this film, instead of just acting like Yondu was the greatest person ever after his death, they literally point out the fact, you know what, he wasn't a great guy, but he tried, you know? And it's like, why don't we ever see that anymore? It's like with so many stories now, it's just glorifying these characters to the point where they just feel unreal. Like they're on a completely different plane of existence, and they're just these angelic, you know, godlike, perfect people. And then this film is just a story about all of these rude, ignorant, just terrible people. If we just see them out on the street, and if we were to interact with them, that's what we think of them. They're just assholes. But it somehow makes them some of the best and most memorable characters from this franchise. And this film just works for me on a level that, you know, no other Marvel movie really does. You know, like my other favorite Marvel movie is Spider-Man Homecoming. And that film is just really solid, and it's funny throughout, and it has a consistent tone, in my opinion. But even that one kind of fails on the ending. Like, they kind of drop the ball, in my opinion, a little bit at the end, by not really highlighting how Peter's heroic actions actually impact the other people around him, and kind of just forcing kind of this positive ending to it. But this film doesn't do that. Like, it's just constructed in a way that I feel is just so well done, and I just can't really criticize it, like, a lot. Like, it's just so solid and well done. And like, I don't mean to make it sound like this is an art film, because it's not. It's like a corny blockbuster movie. But in my opinion, this is what blockbuster movies should be. Like, this is what they should be like. And That is why Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is my favorite MCU film. It just has characters that, despite being aliens and CG raccoons and crap, feel far more realistic and human than any other character, and it deals with just with flawed people, with imperfect individuals. That's what my favorite, Marvel things do, is they deal with kind of the imperfectness within people. Like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is also about that, and deals with that, like with characters like John Walker, who they could paint as kind of the one-dimensional antagonist, villainous guy, but who actually ends up being this imperfect individual. All of my favorite Marvel things, all my favorite stories deal with fallible, imperfect people. And this film just tells such a poignant story about imperfectness and how that makes us human. And it's just a human story. And it's cheesy and corny and over the top, but it's somehow able to strike a far better balance than any other Marvel movie, and in my opinion, than a majority of modern blockbusters that we get nowadays. So, yep, that's about all I have to say about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. That's why it's my favorite MCU movie. You guys please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. What are your thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And if so, what is your favorite Marvel movie? And let me know why. Just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.